Hello, everybody. I'm delighted today to be joined on the podcast once again with my old friend and fellow property geek and general commentator, Henry Pryor. Henry, thank you so much. Always enjoy our chats. You've always got an interesting point, and it's usually not one that other people have thought of. So I'm really grateful for you giving up some time this afternoon. Looking forward to having a bit of property banter. And to help our audience try and understand what on earth is going on out there at the moment, because it's difficult to imagine. There's a lot of moving parts, aren't there?
Absolutely. And frankly, for most viewers of this podcast, I wouldn't blame them if they immediately skip to the end, because we're recording this in the middle of October. People might be watching this in the next couple of days, or they might be watching it knowing your amazing website and technology. It might be coming up to them in March 2023. I have no idea. It's going to be a fascinating few weeks and months to come.
How are you advising? I mean, you're a home finder, you're a buying agent. How are you advising your clients?
I am saying to my clients that whilst I have had some good luck in the past in terms of trying to predict what might be going to happen, some of which has been helpful and some of which has quite rightly led to ridicule at my personal expense. I don't know. If Phil, I had the answer, and if I knew what was going to happen, I would be sitting on my yacht in the Mediterranean, and bluntly, you wouldn't have my number.
Yes, fair enough. Yeah, no, point taken. It's difficult to predict. Well, you can't predict it, but we must have a guess. We must have a stab, because that's what people are worried about. Their concerns, and rightly so. It's a really difficult market at the moment. I mean, if you were a buyer. You were a first-time buyer and you saved up your deposit and you've done all the right things. You're watching mortgage rates go up and you're thinking, well, I'm not sure. Should I go in and get a deal now? Well, it's likely to be more expensive in 6 months' time to get a mortgage, but what's the housing market going to do? Rents are going up as well. Cost of living's going up. So if you were a first-time buyer, if you were guiding and advising a first-time buyer in that situation, what would you be saying?
Well, I've got clients at the moment who are first-time buyers, admittedly at a rather rarefied level of the market, spending £2 to £3 million on their first property. But my advice to them is the same as it is to my eldest daughter, who is looking at possibly buying her first property. She's renting at the moment, and as you say, she's watching rents, particularly for her firsthand, going up significantly. She's renting in London, where although the ONS is telling us that rents yesterday in their report were up 3.4% year on year. I'm afraid there are an awful lot of people, not just those in London, who are going to really struggle to identify with that. Her rent has gone up by nearly 20%. But my advice to first-time buyers at the moment is sit tight and wait, which is not terribly good for business. And of course, means that a lot of our colleagues on the other side, on the sales side, are going to be indignant at that sort of suggestion. But we both know, don't we, Phil, that buying a house is most people's single biggest purchase. And if you get it wrong, which it is quite possible to do, particularly when we live in these uncertain times, then it can be something that hangs around your neck, not just for weeks or months, but actually for years.
Yeah, I mean, words of wisdom. But of course, if you do sit it out, then your mortgage rates are going to go up.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt you, but I think this is the key message that I would love to be able to explain to people who are kind enough to listen, which is that mortgage rates go up, and as a result, house prices come down. The connection between house prices and supply and demand, which many people talk about, is about the demand's ability to be able to fund these purchases. And if borrowing becomes more expensive, which it already was on the 22nd of September, we must remember, and although it's been accelerated since then, since the fiscal event, or the mini budget as we call it, the fact that borrowing is becoming more expensive and that lenders are making it harder to borrow money in the first place is why house prices were already predicted to soften as we go into 2023. And although it is frustrating for a lot of people to hear it boiled down into sound bites, I think that whatever you want to buy will be cheaper tomorrow and will be much cheaper by the time we get into 2023. By how much, I don't know. I'm not expecting house prices to crash, but I am expecting a serious adjustment. Now, people may be able to live with that. And if they are fortunate enough to have by these days, a historic, as in old, mortgage offer from, let's say, just a month ago, then they may well have a 2 or 5 year fixed at a rate that they think they can swallow and digest for that 2 or 5 year period. But if you can't, you need to remember that what you're buying, if you needed to sell it in the next 12 months, is going to be sold to somebody, particularly if you're a first-time buyer, who will also in turn be a first-time buyer, and they will be facing rates of 6, possibly more percent, and slightly tighter affordability criteria.
Yeah.
And what they can afford to pay you for what you at that stage own will be less. So it's difficult, and my daughter is very disappointed and frustrated because she wants to get onto the housing ladder. She wants to get a place of her own, and lots of people do. And the economy needs an active and vibrant housing market for all sorts of reasons that you and I are both aware. But I still think it's important that people understand that even if they've got a decent mortgage offer that they can afford today, they need to price the property they're thinking of buying, assuming that they've actually got what we think rates will be in the first quarter or possibly the first half of 2023, and that will be a lot more than it probably is today.
That was a lot to take in, but I like you're absolutely right. Mortgage rates go up, house prices level out or come off a little bit.
Well, this is the way it's always been. We've seen government initiatives like Help to Buy that have come along, giving buyers more firepower in order to compete with one another for a finite supply of, in this case, property. And if you give, if you and I each had a modest lottery win, well, in your case, probably a very modest lottery win, and we were competing for a flat in a city or town somewhere in the UK, we would use that additional help, whether it's come from the government or indeed our lottery good fortune, to compete with one another and therefore to drive up the price. And if we don't have that, we know that Help to Buy is going to be withdrawn next spring, isn't it? And we know that interest rates are going to rise, and as a result, mortgages will become more expensive. We're going to have less money, not obviously withstanding the fact we've got the cost of living crisis, which is going to restrict people's ability to be able to spend on things like rents and mortgages. As a result, that's going to depress prices.
I would think people love an excuse not to go house hunting, and perfectly understandably, they don't want to make a big important decision when there's a lot of uncertainty. So I agree with you. I think things will calm down, but what I have going around in the back of my head is that during COVID, which was a period of huge uncertainty and low confidence and recession, and we had a booming housing market, and yet I think the housing market usually sort of it survives or it thrives on sentiment, and there we were in a recession, in a global pandemic, and the housing market was like rocket fuel.
And it just illustrates why you'd be mad to listen to me. I sat in the first quarter of in March of 2020 telling people that I expected all the things you have just described to come to pass, and as a result, for house prices to fall. I remember one lonely voice, a wonderful agent in South London, who said, actually, au contraire, Mr. Pryor, I think you'll find you're mistaken. And indeed, she was absolutely right, and I was absolutely wrong. Now, there's lots of reasons now we can have the opportunity to rake over the coals to see why that was. Let's remember that for a large part of the pandemic, we had a stamp duty holiday, and we know that the impact of a stamp duty holiday on the housing market tends to be like rocket fuel. So there's lots of reasons why, as I say, I think there are two types of people when it comes to predicting the housing market. And I've said this to you, and I've said it to others. There are people who don't know, and there are people who don't know they don't know. And at the end of the day, you have to remember that none of us have a crystal ball, and almost certainly, with the exception, and this is not just flattery for you and for your team and what you're doing, but the reason why people crave your view and your opinion and your advice is because 99% of what we read, see, and hear is put out by people who are selling something. They're selling houses, they're selling mortgages, they're selling financial services, and nobody instructs a depressed estate agent. No one borrows money from a mortgage broker who says, oh, that's brave. Our analysts think that interest rates might go to 10%. So they're always going to tell you the most optimistic, the glass half full, with one or two exceptions. So I think that's very important that buyers in particular remember.
Thank you, Henry. I'm going to add one more into your list. I mean, you and I both, to some extent, work in the media, but the media has a big role to play. They need to sell newspapers, and headlines on house prices sell newspapers. And I worry that we're going to get into are we already in a time of sort of sensationalism And as you and I just discussed, nobody knows. But opinions on the front pages of newspapers are very dangerous.
I was furious the day before yesterday. I was rung by a very well-meaning, widely respected journalist for a national newspaper who genuinely wanted to know by how much prices were already down and how much my clients or buyers in general were chipping or renegotiating deals they might otherwise have already got in place.
Yeah.
And where and how much relative to asking price new deals were being done. And I controlled myself just and explained patiently, I hope, and politely, as I'm doing now, that asking prices are not a statement of value. They are not there to tell people, buyers or sellers, what a property is worth. They are part of the marketing. It's far too early for people, whether they're buyers or sellers, to know what's going on in the market because we don't have the data, and we won't have it. Remember, if we agree a deal today, it'll be 4 to 6 weeks before that transaction is crystallized with an exchange of contracts. It'll be another 4 weeks after that before we get to completion, at which time that data goes to the land registry and to others and is then published 2 months after that. So knowing what's going on today won't actually get into the public domain until next February. That's what we have to remember. And people making offers, forgive me, I'm on my soapbox, so I'll shut up in a second.
That's what you're here for.
Lots of people think that, oh, well, I got a really good deal because I paid 10% less than the asking price. Or a seller will say, my agent did a fantastic job, got 15% more than we were asking. The asking price is there to attract people to come and see the property. They want, as you said a moment ago, sometimes they're reticent. It appears that they look for excuses not to go and see a property that's quite suitable. And what they want is the reassurance of an asking price that in their head says, I wish it wasn't that much, but I'm not surprised that it probably is.
Yes.
Imagine estate agents could do it would be so easy to sell houses if all you had to do was stick 10% on your expectation, wait for someone to come and offer you 10% less, make them feel like they've done a great deal, and the deal's done. It's not like that.
There's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there, isn't there? But as you say, an asking price is an asking price, and it's usually got a fair amount of ambition tacked on the top of what might be a value, but it's not a value. It's
produced by a combination of somebody who owns the property who almost certainly thinks it's nicer than it is. Yeah. And on the other hand, their trusted advisor who wants their business, who's always going to flatter.
And now you are on your soapbox. But let's just go back to the media and the headlines, and let's just have a bit of a chat about how people reading the news stories should think and should react, and how should they feel because there will be sensational headlines. It's going to happen.
There will be sensational headlines, and some of them will be worth paying attention to, but the majority of them, I absolutely agree, not only are irrelevant, but will be tomorrow's fish and chip paper. And it is difficult to find a trusted source of information in these days of instant online opinion and newspapers trying to sell their product to people who perhaps might think will agree with that, whatever that opinion or headline or party line is. Look at the authority. Always look in these articles, particularly housing articles about areas of the country or what might be happening to flats versus houses. Look at who is being quoted. Who's the authority? Is it somebody on the proverbial Clapham omnibus? Or is it somebody whose business is selling flats or as opposed to houses? Or is it an economist who's sitting there in their academic ivory tower telling us that, well, I think you'll find, boy, that this being equal and that being equal. I mean, look what we've had since I went on holiday. Not since you, because obviously you just come back from your 8th holiday, no doubt, of the year. But since I came back from holiday in the summer, we've had, 4 chancellors of the exchequer. We've had, I think, we've had 2 monarchs. We're on our 3rd prime minister, or about to elect.
How many housing ministers?
And unbelievably, we joke, it's an industry joke that we have housing ministers every 15 seconds. But actually, we've now got a stable housing department with a housing secretary who's been in post for nearly 40 days. So
goodness me, lucky old us.
Yeah.
Henry, really useful. Just final word, if I may. Words on the street. What are you actually seeing when you're going out looking for clients? And of course, you are looking at sort of high ends of the market. But what's the word on the street? Are people panic selling? Are people pulling out of deals? Is any of that happening? Are you seeing it?
So I'm not seeing a lot of people renegotiating deals that were already done, because by and large, people that have agreed a deal have the finance, if that's important to their transaction, agreed at pre-mini budget levels, and they can stomach that. And in fact, many of them see that as an advantage. So I've yet to experience a deal that has fallen over because somebody has found they can no longer afford whatever they committed to. There are, of course, people who are trying to take advantage of the circumstances and saying, oh, well, I think we're going to find that property prices fall, therefore I want to renegotiate. As there are sellers who, after the changes to stamp duty in the mini budget, said, oh, I'd like a bit of that saving that the buyer's now having. I'd like a bit more, please. So there's always going to be pirates and vagabonds at either end, buyers and sellers.
Yes.
But bluntly, there is a functioning market. You can buy and sell, but clearly the balance of power is swinging back, perhaps to the center. And nowadays I'm finding my inbox full of properties that are surprisingly available again, and properties that have had price reductions from ambitious initial asking prices to more sensible prices. But clearly estate agents who are selling properties are now having lots and lots of viewers and very few offers, much fewer than they were getting. But the best in class, whether it's small 2-bedroom flats or country mansions, is still selling, because there is still an amazing amount of money out there for people who are fortunate enough not to be impacted by all the sorts of things that we're seeing in the headlines.
I love that turn of phrase, best in class. If you're going to buy best in class, whether it's a 1-bed flat, 2-bed flat, 4-bed house, just buy the best that you can get.
Absolutely. Somebody should come up with a TV program based on that. Location.
Who would have thought
best in class?
Yeah, how about that? Henry, thank you so much. Really interesting, great perspective. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.